Welcome to Fables. Typically, we're set up to tell our stories the second Wednesday of every month. But because we're in the middle of a crisis, we've gone virtual and we'll continue to deliver stories on a wide array of topics until we can get back together from the Fables main stage at the Next Stage Theater in Putney, Vermont. Joining me today, a man with his own hashtag, Be the Hammer, and kind of a legend in the world of endurance sports, triathlon, marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. John Young joins the Fables virtual main stage. John, thanks for doing this today.
My pleasure, Peter. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. I think the first time I saw John Young and that you came into my orbit was during a half Ironman distance race in up at Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire that is called the Timberman, which oddly enough will be one of the story that you will tell. I don't know if it's from that particular Timberman where you came into my orbit, but we had gone out there, myself and my friend Kurt, to do the half iron distance on our way to do a full Ironman in Arizona later that year, to check this one off the list. And that's where we saw you for the first time, and your team, and you're the team that you do all your endurance under. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm racing with Achilles International. They kind of started out of New York City. The organization originally started with a runner who had a single leg and amputee, and he wanted to run the New York City Marathon. And at that point, they were saying, "No, you can't run the marathon. We don't have any single leg runners at all." His name was Dick Traum, and he kind of started Achilles International, being the first runner to do the New York City Marathon. And now the organization is worldwide, and basically we are all physically or developmentally challenged, brain injury, cerebral palsy, amputees. I happen to have dwarfism, and they were based out of New York City, but now, like I said, they're spread across the world. We have a chapter in Boston, Massachusetts that I race with, and that was, I think, my first or second year doing the race as a member of Achilles.
Okay, and and I don't want to say anything is the coolest part of this, but the coolest part of this is you get to rack your bike during triathlons with the pros.
Yeah, I get to race with the with what's called mobility impaired or physically challenged category, and we usually go out in a triathlon right after the pro women, and so they let us rack our bikes right with the pros, and we even get a special porta potty and everything. So it's kind of cool. That kind of came later on in my racing. When I first started racing, I was racing just as an age grouper. They didn't really even have a physically challenged category, and so I raced along with everyone else and whatnot. But yeah, that's one really cool thing about it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I kid because I love.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the world of endurance, and there's an old adage, and I know that you know it. It's not if something will go wrong during a race, it's when.
Mm-hmm.
And that can happen, and as we had a chance to talk, often at the worst possible time. I can think about times during the race where I've gotten a flat, or all of a sudden shoes that have just never ever hurt your feet start, trying to saw the small toe off. And these things that push you through. I mean, have you? I know that we're going to get into the story about when this particular worst moment hit for you, but anything else memorable that you can share with us?
Just sometimes forgetting gear. I remember once I went to race in New York City to do the New York City Triathlon, and I didn't have my Garmin watch. And anyone that's into multi-sport racing, most of them like all the numbers and they like to keep track of everything. And so I was freaking out. Like, how am I even gonna exactly? Like, I've got mine on. How am I even gonna be able to do this if the numbers aren't recorded? Like the old adage is, if it's not in Strava, it didn't happen.
Right.
So I borrowed a friend's watch, I remember, and that kind of stuff. Again, because I have a smaller bike, I actually use a custom-made bike that was done by a company here in Massachusetts, 7 Cycles, and I have 20-inch wheels. And so you go to a triathlon and nobody's got spare tubes. And so I always have to have all my own spare tubes just in case something happens. I have done a couple of races when I did the Ironman in Maryland back in 2016 and 2017. They actually like took a bunch of tubes on their bike repair van just in case just in case I had an accident and didn't have enough tubes. And so it was nice to know they had extras there. But
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, or nutrition, you forget you don't bring the gel you like, or you don't bring the right whatever. And so sometimes you have to kind of manage, but forgetting a major piece of equipment is a big thing. Like you don't forget your bike, you don't forget your wetsuit. I've seen lots of guys getting ready for the swim. Oh, I forgot my goggles. Anyone have extra goggles?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it happens all the time.
I always have two or three pair. And I honestly, when I go into a triathlon with three pairs of goggles, I usually leave with at least one pair or two pair, or but I
At
always
most,
end up
yep.
getting. A quick story about my watch. This very watch right here, the very year that I got it, I did an Olympic distance one, and I had put it on over the wetsuit sleeve, and realized, oh, I didn't do this right. I have to, so when I get out of the water, I'm going to have to take the watch off and hold it. And the water and the watch dropped into the water with all of these people coming out. Literally, the watch was maybe 2 days old.
Oh boy.
And I searched high and low for it afterwards, and there was like, yeah, nah, you're done. That watch is gone. I was like, oh, because you know what they cost. They're not inexpensive.
No,
So
they're not.
I was kicking myself. And then literally as I was walking away, they were like, hey, so somebody dropped this red and white watch off. And I turned around, and it was just by chance that it was literally my watch. So
Okay.
I dodged that bullet. But
Good.
those are some of the things that can go wrong during the race. Your thing that went wrong didn't happen during the race. So if we could, let's get into that story, because I have familiar stories with that as well. But let's bring on to the virtual stage John Young to tell his story about some race day woes.
Okay, so back in 2009, that was the first year I actually started into multi-sport racing. So at the age of 43, after battling some health problems, again, as I mentioned, I have dwarfism, and I kind of ballooned up to 195 pounds about 2 years before that. And so I got diagnosed with severe sleep apnea, started using a CPAP machine, got my health back, always been a swimmer, so I got back to the pool. Started to bike around Salem, Mass, where we live here, doing some little trips with friends, nothing crazy at all, never ran in my life. And then in the winter of 2009, I saw a video of Dick and Rick Hoyt doing the Ironman in Hawaii. And I kind of thought, wow, that's a pretty cool thing to try. I'm going to try a triathlon. And so I did some training, did a little bit of looking, and I did this sprint race in June of 2009 up in Lowell. And then a couple weeks later, I did another sprint race here in Salem. And then I reached out to Dick Hoyt to say, hey, you've motivated me to try this. I'm physically challenged. I've got dwarfism. I want to get into this. I seem to be loving this race. And he said, well, there's this race up in New Hampshire in Guilford called the Timberman. And Rick and I are going to be doing the sprint race on the Saturday. The race is already sold out, but I'll ask and see if I can get you in. And so they got me a bib to race that race. And so living here in Salem, I'm like, how am I going to find a place to stay? And I remember mentioning to somebody that I was going to be going up to Guilford, New Hampshire, and the family of one of my students said, oh, we've got a little cottage right on the lake, and in the town next door, I think it's Meredith, and you're welcome to use it. No one's going to be up there, so we'll tell you where to find the key and all that kind of stuff. And so I drive up to New Hampshire. So here I am. It's going to be my third triathlon ever. So I pack up everything in the car, all of my gear, my bike, my wetsuit, my running stuff, my nutrition for the race. And it's kind of this exciting thing. And I'm going to do this all by myself. Family's staying home. And so I drive all the way up from Salem to Meredith. I get into town. I find the little place. They gave me the directions and everything. And it's a beautiful little place right on the water. Gorgeous little house. put all my, get all my stuff out of the car, put it in the house. And so it's kind of like, at mid-afternoon, I head over to the Gunstock ski place where they're having the transition area, or not transition, but the expo. Pick up all my stuff. I get to meet Dick and Rick Hoyt for the first time, so that was kind of an exciting kind of thing to meet them in person, and they would end up turning out to be kind of some of my closest friends. And anyway, I'm all excited. Go back to the house, go out and grab some dinner, and here I'm all excited. And I set my alarm for like 3 a.m. So that race is a really big race, and they tell people get to transition by maybe 4:30 to get in there first, to get a good parking spot, to get your stuff set up and then ready for the race. I think the race started at 6:30 in the morning when the first swimmers went out. So I get to bed, 3 o'clock, the alarm goes off. I get up, really excited. And I start to kind of get ready to put my stuff in the car after I had some breakfast. So here I am, and I'm wearing just my tri-shorts and then a pair of athletic shorts over top of it. No shoes, no shirt, nothing, just in my shorts. And I start to move the stuff from the house into the car. So I go outside with my first load of stuff. I put it beside the car. I go to come back to the house. I'd shut the door, not realizing I'd now locked myself out. So here I am at about 3:30, 3:45 in the morning, in the middle of nowhere. To me, because it's pitch black except for the one light that's on the porch where I'm standing. I'm standing there literally in shorts, nothing else, no shoes. Half of my gear is still in the house. I can see it. And the only thing, I just literally sat there and just went, fuck. What do I do? And I start to panic because I don't know any neighbors. I don't know people that are there. I don't know if people are in their homes. I have no idea. So I start kind of walking around the house, and I'm like, okay, I check the screen doors that are around the back. Of course, I locked those when I'd used them. So the entire place is locked up. And I like, how do I get in the house? Like, I did have my phone. I thought about phoning the family, the Stevens family, to let them know at 3:30 in the morning. Hello, do you have another key hidden somewhere? But I couldn't do that. I thought, okay, I'm not going to do that. So I'm still wondering, and I walk around to one side of the house, and I look up, and like I said, again, I've got dwarfism. I'm about 4 feet tall. I look up, and at about 5.5 or 6 feet, I see a window into the house that's cracked open a little tiny bit. I can't reach it. So what am I going to do? So I look around, and I see this log that they use as a little stool sitting outside of the house. So I move the log over, and I kind of look to my left, and I can see the house next door now through the trees, and there aren't any lights on, but I'm imagining what's going to happen if they hear something, they flip on the lights, and the first thing they see is this half-naked guy with dwarfism trying to sneak into the house. Like, I have no idea. Anyway, I climb up on the log, and I can just barely reach the ledge to get up. So I kind of lift myself up a little bit, and of course there's a screen. I can't get through the screen to get to the window. And I think to myself, well, what's easier to replace, a screen or a window? So I managed to kind of rip the screen out. So I ripped that off the window with one hand, hanging onto this ledge. So you can just visualize this guy hanging from a ledge, like in a place he doesn't live, taking the screen. So I get the screen off, and I managed to kind of just inch up the window a little bit. So now it's open probably about that much. Inch it up again. And I'm now my front of my body's all scraped up from the wood siding on the house. Again, no shoes, nothing. So I inched enough, I think, to get into the window, and then I try and scurry up, and I'm trying to again, I could just visualize what this looks like. If anyone catches me, this is going to be ridiculous. So I finally kind of I get myself up, and I squeeze my body halfway through the window. And then again, the window's not high enough because now my butt is sticking out. So I'm literally stuck in this window with my butt sticking out, my legs, half my body inside. I push, I push, I push, I get it up enough, and bang, I fall into the house. So I'm into this house now, and I look at my watch, and it's now like probably about 10 to 4. I was hoping to be at transition by about 4 o'clock. So I'm about 20 minutes, half an hour away. So I'm already going to be late. That's fine. Okay. So now I've got to like get everything into my car without getting locked in and out again. And I managed to kind of, I get to my car, I get everything into it. I keep checking the door 3 or 4 times to make sure I'm not locked out. I close up the place, and I get in the car and I drive to the Illaquoia State Park. So I'm now like whipping, like going a lot faster than I should have been. But, I get there. Roads are pretty empty except for other people trying to get there for the race as well. I get there. I do have a handicap placard. So that's always the funniest thing is I show up to a race, like, this one was a sprint, but I remember later, like showing up at half Ironman races. And it's like, excuse me, can you tell me where the handicap parking is? And they kind of give me a double take, but they would certainly do this. Like they would have no problems giving that to a wheelchair athlete or anyone else. So why shouldn't I warrant it? So I remember showing it to a police officer saying, is there some handicap parking available? They got me a spot right up near transition. So I got all my stuff into transition. And I remember, kind of like once I got everything in there, got my bike racked, just kind of sitting and realizing like what I put my body through to get there. And I got there on time, but it just, it was wild because this was my first really big race. I think there was something like close to 2,000 athletes in the sprint alone. And then the next day was the half Ironman. And I remember like, just again, I kept visualizing what people would have seen. And so I remember I went and did the race, very difficult race, but, I still remember probably the most satisfying thing is like I said, I've got a kid-sized bike. And this is before I got my customized bike. This was a bike that I had adjusted with the help of our local bike shop here in Salem Cycle. It was a kid's mountain bike that I had some smaller wheels put on. I think at that time, I don't even know if I had a tri-handlebars. I might have just had regular mountain bike handlebars at that point. And if you've ever been to Illaquoia State Park, especially doing the race, there's that big hill when you leave the park. And I remember cycling up that big hill in this race, and I passed a guy like on a regular standard, 27-inch like wheeled bike, and the double take that he got or that he gave me was like, what the fuck? How is this guy cycling faster than me? So it was kind of, satisfying, but it was a great race. And it turned out to be a beautiful day. I finished that race. I remember, it was all over, getting back to the house and now thinking to myself, like, how do I now explain what I just did to these people when they come back to the house and see the screen ripped out of the window? So I remember I left some money because, they said, oh, you can stay for free. But I left some money saying, please repair the screen. I'm really sorry for what I did. The interesting part is I came back the next year to race again. And they reached out to me and said, hey, if you ever do the race again, feel free to ask to borrow our, to use our place. And I remember going back the next year to race again to do that sprint. And then after that sprint, I remember I did the half a number of times, and that's where I met you guys, I think a year or two later. But I remember the second time when I went back there, I checked and they had never replaced the screen. They just put the broken screen back up there. So it didn't seem to bother them very much that I had done this. But that was kind of, I think that is probably the most bizarre kind of occurrence that I had. And it was very early in my career. So I think anything else that happened to me kind of pales in comparison in terms of the nerves that I kind of developed, dealing with challenges and stuff racing. But it was, like I said, that was the start of my career. I think that summer I did four triathlons, and now I've done close to 70, like from all the different distances and stuff. And I've met some great people, like you and Kurt are two great examples. And this part of my life is amazing. But that story, like I said, I'll never forget it.
Yeah. So I don't know that meeting Kurt and I is a great example, but it is an example. So we sort of do our own thing. We have our own tragedies, but yeah, that's a really stressful way to go into a race.
Yep.
Try to.
Yeah. It like I said, I think once I settled down and realized that everything was going to be okay. I remember doing this. The swim in that race was really bizarre because when you do the sprint race, you are literally swimming in water that's never deep enough for most average sized people to stand up. And most people that were over 5 feet tall could literally walk the race if they wanted to. And
Yeah.
that I think made it if someone's silly enough to walk, it's a lot slower to walk. So I don't know why they would want to walk, but it's nice to be able to swim and see the bottom and not see any kind of weird creatures and stuff. So that
Yeah.
part was nice.
That is nice. We did the one out in I can't remember where it was. It's called the Tin Man. It's a tough man sanctioned race, and it was a half iron distance in the middle of the summer. And they don't tell you until you get into the water that you're swimming in a reservoir that was once a flooded town.
Oh,
That was a town that was flooded. So on a clear day, as it was that day, you could literally down and see the remnants of housing, and it's very
oh,
creepy. It's
oh,
not.
that would be extremely creepy.
Yeah, it's not a pleasant feeling at all.
Nope.
John, listen, I wanna thank you for jumping on to the virtual Fables main stage and sharing your story with us. John has had a couple of years ago had done a 12 and 12 challenge,
Yep. Yep.
where you did a marathon each and every month, which
I did either a full marathon or 2 half marathons every month for a year from April to April.
and
Started with the Boston Marathon in 2018 and ended with the Boston Marathon in 2019.
right. So congratulations on that. And I know that it will not go unnoted that you came into our state. You didn't stop to say hello, but we're not bitter.
I think I ran in the Vermont. One of the races was the Vermont City Marathon.
Right.
For a fair-sized city, it was a great race. I love the church bells at the beginning. That was really cool. There's an area that you run through a kind of a cobblestone area, and a lot of drag queens are out kind of cheering everyone on, and that was a blast. The bagel shops everywhere. You guys seem to love bagels in Vermont. I don't know,
Yeah. Well,
but I loved it. It was a great town. The hospitality there was amazing.
well, John, thanks for jumping on the virtual Fables main stage today and telling us and sharing your story with us.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.